Hi there, and welcome to this day in history for January 22nd. January 22nd is the 22nd day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 343 days remaining to the end of the year, 344 in leap years. Today's word is evocative. Evocative is an adjective that means evoking or tending to evoke an especially emotional response. A word that uses itself to describe itself. So let's dig a little deeper. Evoke means to call forth or recreate imaginatively. So evocative would mean to call forth or recreate imaginatively an especially emotional response. These words, evocative and evoke, come to us from French, Latin before that. First known use of the word evocative is 1657. Evocative. And with that, the Pontifical Swiss Guard is a minor armed forces and honor guards unit maintained by the Holy See that protects the Pope and the Apostolic Palace, serving as the de facto military of Vatican City. And the first contingent of 150 Swiss Guards arrived at the Vatican on January 22nd, 1506. This is the birthday of Sir Walter Raleigh, born somewhere around January 22nd in 1552 or 1554. Why so vague? This is one of those cases where the records were kept a little differently back then than they are now. Instead of the issuance of a birth certificate, often the first records of one's existence might be a baptism record, which is typically not on the day of birth. Anyway, one of the things Sir Walter Raleigh is known for is that he brought tobacco to England. He was a favorite of Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, who was perhaps the original strong, independent woman who didn't need no man. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. But even though she was too wary to get deeply personally involved with men in terms of a romantic type of relationship, she didn't necessarily dislike men. She was particularly fond of Sir Walter Raleigh. She was really upset when she discovered that he had secretly married one of her ladies in waiting. Secretly, and of course without the Queen's permission. Seems like he was in and out of favor at various times, and in and out of prison. In the end, he offended Spain, and the Spanish ambassador insisted he be executed. Indeed, Sir Walter Raleigh was executed in October of 1618 at the age of 65. The United Mine Workers of America was founded in Columbus, Ohio on January 22, 1890. Initially, they represented coal miners, but these days they also represent healthcare workers, truck drivers, manufacturing workers, and public employees in the United States and Canada. Now, you may remember that the other day we mentioned the failing health of Queen Victoria. In her last days, she had become weak, confused, and drowsy, and then she was stricken with paralysis, as it was reported. I'd guess a stroke. As we mentioned then, the end was near, and sure enough, on January 22, 1901, the grandmother of Europe, Queen Victoria, died at the age of 81, having reigned as queen for 63 years. Upon her death, Edward VII was proclaimed king. January 22, 1946 marks the creation of the Central Intelligence Group, which eventually evolved into the Central Intelligence Agency. They have a website, which among other things has a feature called World Factbook, where you can learn all kinds of things about countries all over the world. You can see stuff like the flag of that country, a map, a summary about the country, travel facts, and a few other interesting bits. There's a link to the World Factbook in the description. CIA, great source for research, that website. The Apple Macintosh computer was introduced in an amazing Super Bowl ad on January 22, 1984. I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but that ad is so epic I just had to mention it again. Word is that the board of directors hated that ad, didn't want to run it, but the late Steve Jobs loved it. I'm glad he prevailed. It's an awesome commercial. I checked the link to make sure it's still on YouTube, And that link is in the description today. It still gives me goosebumps. Big stuff for free thinkers. American Pie by Don McLean features a phrase, "the day the music died," which alludes to the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Ritchie Valens in 1959. Almost like a meditation, the song goes on to examine some of the events that have occurred since then: cultural changes, disillusionment, and loss of innocence. In the 50-plus years since its release, people have been trying to scope out and explain what it means. But as perhaps with some poetry and certainly a good bit of art, the symbolism in this song represents more of an impressionistic take rather than a literal portrayal. American Pie begins its second of 4 weeks in the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 on January 22nd, 1971. American Pie by Don McLean. Link in the description. And I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with the link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That description lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include the link to my blog page that is called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, Parler, BitChute, and Getter. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. January 2nd. The 16th. It's all written in Roman numerals, so I had to translate it. There's a little birdie on my front porch. Hopefully I got that pronunciation close. I have a crystal, a faceted crystal hanging in my window, and the sun has moved around so that it's sending rainbows into the room, flinging happiness all over the place. Alrighty, back to work.